Greetings, Geeksters. Today is Fat Tuesday, so I'm going to be making a king cake. It is a yeasted cake, so it does take a little bit of time. These are the ingredients for the dough. We've got all-purpose flour, milk, butter, egg, yeast, and sugar. I will be using a recipe that I found on All Recipes and cutting it in half because I don't need 2 king cakes. First up, we make the dough. So we're going to put in a small saucepan 2 tablespoons of butter and half a cup of milk. Now, it did say to scald the milk. However, I have found that that is really not necessary with modern pasteurization because it's basically pre-scalded. If you want to go ahead and scald the milk beforehand, before adding the butter, go for it. I really haven't found that it makes much of a difference. But we do want to heat this up until the butter is completely melted. Be sure to keep the heat at about medium because milk will boil over if you look away from it for even 2 seconds. The butter is nearly melted. This particular pan is cast iron, so it will retain heat. And as you can see, the milk is starting to bubble around the edge. So we're going to go ahead and turn that off. Move it off the heat and let it sit till it cools, about 15 minutes. Next up, we're going to proof the yeast. I'll put 1/3 of a cup of warm water. You don't want it too hot, it'll kill the yeast. If it's too cold, however, the yeast won't bloom. And half a tablespoon of dry yeast. And a half a tablespoon of sugar to feed the yeast, kind of gives it a little boost. We're going to let this sit and proof for 5 to 10 minutes. Now the yeast is alive and active, so now we're going to add our milk and butter mixture to it. One egg and 7 tablespoons of sugar with a half teaspoon of salt mixed in. I'm going to whisk until thoroughly combined. Now we're going to fit the mixer with the dough hook. Pour the milk and yeast mix in. And then we're going to add about 3½ cups of flour, 1 cup at a time. Scrape down the bowl to make sure the flour gets all incorporated with the yeast mix. dough is all incorporated. To take it off the hook. There might be a little bit of flour still down in the bottom to incorporate. Sometimes it doesn't mix all the way in, but looks like today it did. So we want to turn the dough out on a well-floured surface and knead until it is smooth and elastic. If the dough is too sticky, add a little more flour. If it's too stiff, you can incorporate a little water into it, but not too much, otherwise then you got to add a bunch more flour. It's a learning process. Since we use the machine to do the first round of kneading, you don't have to do a huge amount the second time. I'm going to form it into a ball. I'm going to place the ball in an oiled pan. I don't have any oil except olive oil right now, so I will be using butter. Ball in, roll it around, coat the surface of the dough. And we cover the bowl with plastic wrap. You can also use a towel. I like plastic wrap, it keeps dust and things out of your bowl. And now we set it aside and let it rise for an hour and a half. Now it's time to make the filling. You can put raisins in this as well as pecans or any kind of nut you like. Traditionally it's raisins and pecans, but I decided to go with straight pecans this time around. Now we're going to mix together the pecans, brown sugar, and some flour. Add about a half a tablespoon of cinnamon. And mix all together. You can also use pumpkin pie spice if you want something a little bit different. For this particular recipe, I like just straight cinnamon. And then we're going to add a 1/4 cup of melted butter. And mix it all together. You want to make sure the butter is completely incorporated and that there's no powdery bits. It's time to roll out the dough. You want to make sure your work surface and your rolling pin is well floured, otherwise it will stick everywhere. And what we're shooting for is a basic rectangle. It's a little hard to get a circle into a rectangle if it's not perfect. Don't sweat it, but it still tastes good. makes it a little easier to roll it up and to pinch the ends in together if it is more rectangular shaped. You want it fairly long because you're going to have to roll this up like a jelly roll and then bring the ends together to form a ring. Now I'm going to sprinkle the filling onto the dough. Get spread out fairly evenly. Now the tricky part. You're going to start rolling from the long edge. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Just once it bakes, it's going to lose a lot of its sharp edges. Any filling that escapes, just throw it back in. I should have rolled this a bit tighter. So I'm going to just pinch the seam shut like so. And we're going to turn it over, seam side down. Bring the two ends together. And pinch the seam together. And this one's not cooperating. To transfer this to a parchment paper lined baking sheet. My seam's not holding together, but it'll be fine. You can see my ring is really fat. Technically, it should probably be a bit thinner. I should have rolled it out longer. Now you're going to take a pair of scissors and just snip little slots in the top. So that it exposes the filling slightly. Cover this again with plastic wrap. I'm going to use 2 sheets just to make sure that it stays completely covered. And now we let it rise for 30 to 45 minutes. So now the king cake has risen. I definitely should have made the roll longer because it is really fat and it's going to take a long time to bake. So while we wait for the oven to heat up, it's time to do the glaze. Glaze is super simple. It's just a cup of powdered sugar and about a tablespoon and a half of water. Start with a tablespoon, see how it looks. Definitely gonna need a little more water. You want it thin enough to pour, but not so thin that it's all going to run off. It is still way too thick. So I'm going to add just a little bit more water. That's about the thickness we need there. Once cake comes out of the oven, which is currently in the oven at 375 degrees, we will put on the glaze and the sugar. All right, the cake is out of the oven. I definitely should have rolled it out longer because it's a bit on the fat side. But it is Fat Tuesday, so fat cake for Fat Tuesday. So we're going to put the glaze on. It's not supposed to be like a total frosting, but you do want to make sure that you've got enough coverage so that the colored sugar, which goes on next, will actually stick. Next, last step is we put the sugar on that I made earlier, the colored sugar I made earlier, and there will be a link down below to the recipe, or to the video. This is not working all that well. Previous times I've had a shaker, but I don't have one currently. There, that's better. Looks like the glaze is starting to harden up a bit. I should have done this a little quicker. And it's done. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our page, and we will be posting content regularly. It won't always be cooking. It'll be other things that we like to geek out about. We are happy to have you, and good geeking.